morning, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is David Okon. I've been talking about work, and if you watch this video, watch with the rest of the videos preceding this video. I've talked about different elements of work, employment. We talked about contracts, and today we'll be talking about pay in the United Kingdom. If you work for a living, you get paid. And therefore, if you get paid in your life, if you work for a pay, leave a comment below. If you work and you are not paid, leave a comment below. We'll talk about laws and policies in the United Kingdom. And as I said before, what happened in the United Kingdom happened across the globe similarly, because of globalization, because of capitalism, because of the market economic system. So payments in terms of work is part of an economic infrastructure. But like I said, also is also part of the social welfare infrastructure, because if people work and they are paid in the United Kingdom, paying for earning from work is a primary source of income for the vast majority of the population. Perhaps I would say 90 to 95% who necessarily work for a living and as of necessity, as opposed to people who work for a living because people who work because they want to work, because they are multimillionaires and multi-billionaires. I have made these remarks consistently, repeatedly, so that we form a view what work is all about, what income is all about, is your level of your income, and also the in a way determines the level of your wealth. Wealth may come in all shapes and sizes for those who are wealthy, who are multi-billionaires. But I would say this, that for ordinary people, income is probably the only source of wealth they have. And for buying, for purchasing the basic necessities. This is why work is extremely important. And today we'll be talking about pay. What in wages, including wages, covering our wages are paid, and the pay statements which are itemized. These are specific elements we are looking at, and also overpayment of wages. Sometimes you are overpaid, and that creates one problem or another in terms of law and policy on pay. We will look at equal pay as well, and what it is, and who can claim equal pay, and what equal work is. These are common issues in terms of equality as well. And also to try to understand the issues surrounding workers, comparing himself with secrecy clauses. What defense employers can provide when they are in a situation of dispute, and how to make a claim, and also the possible remedies. So these are some of the issues we'll be looking at broadly going forward in terms of pay, and we will also look at national minimum wage. It's not in this video necessarily, but this is just because we are starting to talk about pay today. So this is a timeline along these topics, and also leave a comment below what you think about pay as a topic of discussion on this platform. And also, if you haven't subscribed to this channel to support it. Subscription is free, you don't have to pay anything. We should not, as users of YouTube, confuse subscription with membership. Membership is paid for every month. If you register as a member of a channel, my channel is too small to allow that a component. You cannot be a member to my YouTube channel because it's still too small. If it grows to a certain size, then you would have the option of being a member. Now you can subscribe by just clicking an icon for subscribing, which is very helpful for us to help us grow as a channel. If you like our materials, if you don't, also do it, because somebody somewhere likes my material. Maybe you will like it in the future when I'm doing something slightly different, because at the moment I'm talking about employment. A lot of people may not be interested to hear anything about employment. That is okay. that doesn't mean you shouldn't support the channel. It's not necessarily, but you have the option to support it or not support it. But if you help in one way or the other, you also get help. In one way or the other, it's good to help. Very little helps. And we are as like I said, when we talk about national minimum wage and also national living wage, I've actually discussed about this in broad terms, talking about the cost of living crisis in the United Kingdom. But I also said what happened in the UK also happens abroad. I keep repeating these points because they are quite important. If you are living in a modern society, if you are to learn or just one subject, the base, probably the only subject you should learn is about globalization. In globalization and capitalism and the market economic system, big corporations, and all these serve to determine how we live our life within the economy, within the politics, and within society, within every element of our existence. We need to really pay attention to this because your life is in your hands. You necessarily need to take responsibility for yourself. If you are a child, maybe you are a year, 5 years, or I'm not sure what 5 years can do, but they can do very little else. They can do one thing or another, because you see, when we come to an age in our society where everybody is suspected to be self-reliant, you don't necessarily. We are a society increasingly having to rely on yourself. I don't know what ultimately, maybe 100, 200, 500 years time, I don't know what is going to happen in our society, because who will look after the kids? Who will have to look after the elderly? Who will look after the disabled people who are poor? Because there is going to be poverty in spite of a lot of wealth going around, because of the political system, also the economic system, which is, these days when you talk of politics, it's so difficult to separate politics with the economy. So we'll talk about the minimum wage and the minimum living wage, so which is actually who is entitled to national minimum wage, and also people who are not covered by a national minimum wage, which work hours it applies to. So these are something you can actually consider. So we are going to look at also unauthorized deduction from wages as it is, and also we are looking at the laws which protects a worker with unauthorized deduction from their wages by an employer, and including also who is protected necessarily, and what and when deduction can be made, and looking at special rules for retail employees and how to dispute a deduction. The reason we specifically mention retail, because retail in the United Kingdom is the #1 employer, especially of young people. But now, in terms of employment and perhaps also employability, it is in decline because of technology. If you go to big supermarket now, especially big supermarket, at the checkout where cashiers actually work, your customers now the new cashiers, because there are no cashiers in the shop necessarily, because they are supervisors. You now self-check out. If you go to as a customer now, you do the checkout yourself. You are actually the cashier. You are also the shop assistant, because the materials are priced. You just look at the price, you pick it up, you put it in your, and it's also labeled. Stores are labeled. You just look around. So you don't depend on shop assistants. Shop assistants are now out there to fill up the shelf. So we'll also be looking at getting paid when you leave a job. Because if you leave employment, you may still be owed some money, and things like your final pay, and when you leave a job, and if it is right, because sometimes you're paid the wrong amount, or you are not paid at all, and also what steps to take to rectify if it is not right. And these are some of the things we will be looking at going forward. Thank you so much. And so, like I said, we will be looking at wages, and the information as I represent them here will be applying to England, but it can also apply to Northern Ireland, Scotland, and also in Wales. But in practice, normally, So now, going forward, we will be looking at these items more closely in terms of payment of wages, itemized pay statements of payment of wages, of expenses, and also other elements to this discussion. Leave a comment below. Thank you so much. So these material actually give information about wages and how they are paid. So it does not deal with deductions from wages or changes to the amount of wages which somebody who is working for an organization may be able to claim. And also, if you are interested to look in detail, you can go online and look about protected, how someone in your position, if you are a worker, how you can be protected from having unauthorized deductions from your wages. And also you can look in fair detail how you can do what you can do actually about cuts in wages, because these are some of the things which happen. Leave a comment below, let me know your views on this topic. The reason I'm talking about it because employment is the most important aspect of ordinary people in the world. A community which works can succeed. A community which doesn't work doesn't succeed. If you work, then you know you can succeed. But you cannot sit and do nothing and say, I'm going to succeed, because success is the product of work. So that's why talking about work is really important. Although the way I talk about work under these circumstances is my primary aim to talk about work is to look at income, because at the beginning of this program I've been talking about the cost of living crisis, which I will continue to talk about. And I think it is so important. It's a sign of what is going on in our society, because livelihood is of primary importance. If you have money, you can pay your bills, you can do development. I mean, if you want a house, if you are in a country where you can still buy a house, because there are other countries where ordinary people can no longer buy a house. You can't build a house in Britain if you are an ordinary citizen without borrowing money. Because I talked about borrowing money. If you watch the rest of the video, I've been discussing things like debt. And debt is a major problem because it's related to income also. People borrow money because they don't have enough. Because minimum wage we have been talking about is so low in the UK. I've been talking about this. And that's why now I need to kind of like look at certain materials to kind of correlate with what I've been talking about. And therefore, so let us look at the amount of wages. It's from 1st of April 1999. There is a national minimum wage. This applies to most workers, with certain exceptions. This applies to the national minimum wage, which is paid at different rates depending on the worker's age and on whether they are a trainee or apprenticeship. agricultural workers have their own minimum wage. Stay tuned, continue watching. You can look in fair detail about national wage, minimum wage, more about minimum pay in agricultural sector or industry. So the worker may be entitled to more pay than the national minimum wage if they have this right in their contract. Remember, we discussed contract already, which we can look at again for a worker who is not covered by the national minimum wage or the agricultural minimum wage. The amount to pay they are entitled to is governed only by what is in their contract of employment. Remember, we also talked about statutory component and contractual component of entitlements, rights, or benefits which arise from this relationship, from this legally based relationship. Watch this video, watch the rest of the video, or leave a comment below if you have particular interest in terms of understanding how the environment of rules on pay works. You can also go online at gov.uk if you're in the UK, or also if you are outside the UK, you can visit the website of the United Kingdom government, or you can try your own government website, which you can find this type of material, which is comprehensive government policy on employment, in particular on wages, on pay per se. We are talking about wages, and you can look at contract of employment, which we already looked, and we can always be happy to go back and forth looking at the same time permitting, and also motivation allowing. So our wages are paid. Let us look at this. An employee who started work on or after the 1st January in 1987 in Northern Ireland, on the 5th September 1988, will have the method by which they are paid, that is by cash or by check or bank transfer, defined by their contract of employment. There is no statutory right to have wages paid in a certain way, for example in cash. So that is clear. And I'll leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. If you want this to be statutorily enshrined in law, which is a stronger right-giving source of law to both employee and employer. But like I've said previously, in the modern political attitude, environment of surrounding political attitude as now, there is a propensity of the government to give more support to employer, because the emphasis of any government, including here in the UK, is actually economic growth, and also managing the growth, the wealth of the nation, also supporting big organizations to manage wealth, because they are now the ones who run the countries economically. Therefore, the argument is now in favor of employer, especially big corporations, who are now more free to employ, or perhaps also deploy, system of contract to develop relationship between the employer and employees. We have discussed this. Going forward, time and life permitting, I will be talking more about employment. Also leave a comment below if you need to know more. And therefore, like I said before, the 1st January 1987, this is in England and Wales, and also in Scotland, but in Northern Ireland from September 1988, manual workers were legally entitled to be paid in cash. If somebody is in a situation where they are a manual worker who has been employed by the same employer since before this date, has the right to continue to be paid in cash. In practice, this right will be difficult to enforce if the employer can argue that they wish to transfer to cashless pay for reasons of security, and about cash as in practical, as we look at the practicality of using cash, I can say from the top of my head now that we in the United Kingdom probably only use 20% of our transaction in cash, because we are becoming a cashless society, and this is a natural process because technology is taking over the economy, and also every aspect of life. Money is included, so that is a point of note. And I've said before, if you're to learn about one thing in your life, learn about globalization. About in terms of globalization, if you are to learn only one thing about globalization, then you learn about global security. But also technology also is important. But even in technology, learn about cyber security, for example, because with technology relates to everything pretty much relate to security. But technology is becoming a very important aspect of employment because it's taking over work. We are going to be societies of joblessness in the next 100 to 300 or maybe 500 years. Less and less work will be available for members of the global societies. Therefore, this is something we need now to acquaint ourselves with, to prepare, especially the next generation. Even beginning now, if you struggle to find work, which is a major issue, especially well-paid professional work, is so difficult because of technology. Even if you are a lawyer, if you are an accountant, you are actually the engineer, computer engineer, or any of the technical fields which used to really guarantee employment. Yeah, even in medicine now, technology is becoming, doctors, modern doctors, actually looking at artificial intelligence. If you're to know something about technology, start by knowing something about artificial intelligence, because increasingly now it's being introduced in almost every sector of society. Even in social media, you can see someone like me speaking, but they wouldn't necessarily be me. But you take what you get and carry on with your life. Fair enough. Stay tuned. Continue watching.
Some see the original, mighty the god, the magical radical. Hey, representing my magical. Young Jose, come million. Amigo wacha, that difta. Kina teach me can you amigo kopa. That wacha, kina damage me can you amigo wacha. That difta, kina teach me can you amigo kopa. That difta, kina damage me can you. Come to the camera, come on, there we are there for the bed. We have a day, you're my baby. Every day I call you, my door, you're my treasure.
So we can also look at a situation where there is a transference from payment in cash to payment by check or bank transfer, which can cause also problems. It can also be problematic for somebody in your situation, if it's a worker who starts a new job where you are paid, your pay is made by check or bank transfer. So there are people who do not have bank accounts and cannot obtain one, possibly because of their financial history, and checks may take some time to clear. These are some of the disadvantages which may or may not be obvious to everyone. So when an employer insists on paying a check or a bank transfer, and someone has been unable to open an account, they could consider asking the employer to help. The employer may be able to persuade their own bank to open an account for a worker. So this is actually a daily living situation involving laws and policy on work. And so what happens, at what intervals wages are paid. looking at the interval of wages being paid, and all employees and workers are legally entitled to written statement of their main terms and conditions of employment from the first day in their jobs. So the statement must provide information on how frequently wages will be paid, for example, weekly or monthly. So let us stay tuned, continue watching. We're looking at a written statement which is in evidence of the contract of employment. It does not contain everything that would be in a contract. In addition to the statement, the contract should also have when the wages are paid, for example, at the end of the week, in the middle of the week, or at the end of the month. So also whether wages are paid in advance or in arrears. With monthly pay, some of it is often in advance and some are in arrears. Weekly pay is usually in arrears. So these are things you would be interested in. Payment is really an exciting moment in your employment episode. So stay tuned, continue watching. If wages are paid, weekly wages is usually paid in arrears if wages are paid a week in hand. So sometimes the workers' weekly pay is paid to 2 weeks in arrears, so that they effectively hold a week's pay throughout their employment. And so this is known as a week in hand, or sometimes a deposit, and this will not be paid until the worker leaves the job. So you talk about deposit, you talk about money you're paid in arrears. When you start work, you don't get paid maybe in the first week or in the first 2 weeks. This is the money the employer holds for reason unknown to them. So the job in hand payment is then made at the rate payable in your penultimate week of work, and not at the rate payable in their first week. In Scotland, this is known as the lie week or lying time, and in Northern Ireland, the lie in week. These are terminologies used in different regions. Leave a comment below if you live in England, Wales, or Scotland, or Northern Ireland. What happens to your money, the money you work for by employer in one way or the other. So if you are in a situation where you may be uncertain about your pay arrangements, and in order to get help, you may be needing some you need really careful support. So you will need to establish the details of these materials, of this information, referring to pay slips if possible, because evidence is everything. So what is the start and end day of your pay period? So when you are paid. So when you are paid, for that pay period, and how you are being paid. So these are actually the things we look for when we are trying to assess. We are trying to be our own helpers. We are trying to help ourselves. You do it yourself, because if you are to get support from professionals, sometimes you get free help. But free help these days are not easy to get because of lack of resources. So material like this is a pointer to your empowerment in terms of employment, to gently reminding viewers to be self-reliant, be empowered, look for information on employment, whether you're working, whether you're not working, whether you are still in university, or you are still in college, you are a young person, if you are an elderly I mean, every little help. We are a society, we are community, sometimes we are also families. So it helps if you have the knowledge of one thing or another, and employment is extremely important. So let us look at employer changes, how where employer are changing how and when our wages are paid. And so if the employer changes the method or timing of paying wages, this would be a change to the worker's contract of employment. Any changes to a contract of employment must be agreed by both parties, although in practice it is difficult for any individual worker to oppose unilateral changes made by an employer. So you talk about balance of power between employee and employer, which therefore calls into question the independence of relationship in the contractual sense of the word as to employment, especially in relation to pay. So the worker could consider the following. If they are a member of a trade union, they should contact the trade union representative for advice. If they are not a trade union member, they will have to negotiate with the employer or the bureau in terms of advisors, and therefore could do it on their behalf. Like I said, for example, a professional doing it for you, or you do it yourself. As I would say, increasingly now, for example, if the employer wants to change the intervals at which wages are paid from weekly to monthly, so the client could ask them to provide an advance of wages during the first month, more about how to negotiate with the employer, because if you are to wait for 1 month, then that would be a shock to people who earn very low. The minimum wage is very low. It's a problem. So if there's a disagreement with the proposed changes, they could, in theory, sue the employer for breach of contract. In practice, this would not really be practicable, as it would be difficult for them to show that they have suffered a loss. Courts do not award damages for inconvenience. So it also is doubtful that they could claim constructive unfair dismissal. This is because the method and frequency of wages payments are not fundamental terms of the contract. You can look more in terms of changing terms of contract. We are talking in the common language of complexity. That's why I'm trying to take you through all these processes so that we try to see the reality involving laws concerning intricate matters involved, including one of employment and pay. So let us look at the element of itemization of pay as contained in itemized pay statements, and therefore most employees and workers have a statutory right to receive from their employers a detailed written pay statement or at before the time of the payment of wages. You can check if you are in such a situation or not. If you're not sure, you can always check going online or speak to a professional to do so for you. Writing includes typing, printing, lithography, photography, or other modes of representing or reproducing words in a visible form. So this would include an email pay statement. This may raise a discrimination issue, for example, for workers who cannot use a computer. Increasingly, the older you are, the more likely you're not able to actually use a computer, because computer is generationally inclined. The younger you are, the more computer competent you are. But also there's an element of cost, because if you don't have a proper equipment, and also sometimes you may be contracted to what you might consider as an affordable source of internet, but if it is too slow even to do anything, because you can, there are so many suppliers, providers of internet these days. You can go to any one of them, and you can be attracted because they are affordable. If you can't use them, then you're wasting your money, and you are actually risking your life, because your life sometimes depends on whether or not you are working internet. This is another issue which you leave a comment below. Let me know what you're thinking. What you're thinking is stay tuned, continue watching.
MVC record.
Batidas on the beat.
Stay tuned, continue watching. We are talking about payment, paying wages. We are looking at how payment works, and also we are looking at a situation where some workers are not really entitled to an itemized pay statement. These are important documents to provide evidence that you are getting the correct amount, that you are actually getting even anything. The following people are not entitled to receive a pay statement: anyone who is not an employee, for example, an independent contractor or a freelance agent. We talk about employment status in the other videos. This is what we talk about. These are the impact you may experience because your right may depend on your employment status. So for anyone who is not an employee, for example, an independent contractor or freelance agents, that's an example of employment status in terms of pay. An employee who ordinarily works outside the United Kingdom under their contract of employment, because other laws in other countries will be applicable other than the UK. One way or the other, members of the police service, merchant, seamen, or share fishermen. Leave a comment below if you're a police officer watching this video in the United Kingdom, and try and find out why you are treated differently from other category of workers. And so let us look at what itemized pay statement must contain. So we are looking at every pay statement must give the following information: the gross amount of wages or salary, the number of hours worked, if the amount of pay needs depends on this. So the amount of any fixed deductions and the purposes for which they are made. This deduction, for example, trade union subscriptions and national savings scheme contributions. We talk about cost of wages to people who receive payment. So the total fixed figure or fixed deduction when a separate statement of the details has been provided. So the amount of any variable deduction and the purpose for which they are made, and the amount of any variable deduction and the purpose for which they are made, the net amount of any wages or salary payable, the amount and method of each part of payment when different parts of the net amount are paid in different ways. For example, the separate figures of cash payment and balance credited to a bank account. Stay tuned, continue watching. Looking at an employer also may choose to give either a payment statement, a pay statement which specifies the amounts and the purposes of every fixed deduction separately, or pay a statement which specifies only the total amount of all fixed deduction without any explanation of their purpose. In this case, the employer must give the employee a standing statement of fixed deduction which identifies all the regular deduction from their wages at the also at or before the time the payment is issued. Stay tuned, continue watching. So if a standing statement of fixed deduction is used, it must be in writing and must, for each item deducted, state the amount, the in intervals at which the deduction is made, and the purpose or description of the deduction, for example, national savings scheme or trade union subscription, or actually be given to the employee at or before the time of issuing any pay statement which quotes the total figure of fixed deductions, or also be raised at intervals or no longer than 12 months apart, incorporating any deductions. If there is any changes at all which affects an employee's fixed deduction, the employer must give the employee either a written notification of the details of the change, or an amended standing statement, or fixed deduction which is then valid for up to 12 months before issue. Stay tuned, continue watching. So you can actually raise a complaint about itemized pay in statements. Application may be made to an employment tribunal by means of an employee, if their employer fails to provide an itemized pay statement, a decision on what particulars ought to have been included, and also an employer or employee, if there is a question about what information ought to have been included in a pay statement or a statement of fixed deduction, or also an employee, if the deductions are made which the employer has not notified to which the employer has not notified to the employee. So therefore, you have also a situation where the employee can ask for a declaration and for the employment tribunal to exercise its discretion to make a compensatory award and about also compensation for unnotified deduction in terms of employment law. This is can be found at the source such as Advisor's Handbook. If you are an advisor, these are some of the information you can look for online, and then use it for one purpose or another. So an employer seeking a decision, or an employee who considers that an employer has failed to comply with the requirements for changing how and when wages are paid, may apply to a tribunal. And therefore, you can look at more detail, at fair detail, how to apply to employment tribunal. So you can also consider looking at overpayment of wages or expenses, and where an employer has overpaid an employee, the employer may want to recover the overpayment by making deduction from the worker's wages. In these circumstances, the employee would not be protected from an unlawful deduction from their wages under the Employment Rights Act of 1996 in Northern Ireland Employment Rights Order. This is because the Act gives the employers the right to make deductions without prior agreement in certain circumstances, including when an overpayment has been made. So you can look in more detail about deduction from wages. These are sources of contention or dispute between an employee and employers, which are very common. However, if the employer makes deduction without the employee's agreement, the employer will be in breach of contract. This is because they will not have paid the agreed wage for the relevant period. An employee in these circumstances will have to go to court for a remedy. You comment below if you have to go to court if you're an employee, in the practicality and the nature of the situation. If you're working, especially if you're low pay, you may have to also pay lawyers to go to court in order to win, or even if you win, the cost of the court in terms of access to justice. This is because they will not have paid the agreed wage for the relevant period. An employee in these circumstances will have to go to court for a remedy. In practice, there's little point in doing this unless they can argue that they fit certain circumstances. This is because the employee would be claiming damages for breach of contract, that is the non-payment of full wage. However, the employer can counter claim that they were owed the amount of the overpayment. So an employee could use the fact that there may be a breach of contract to negotiate with the employer the possibility of repaying the overpayment in affordable installments. The employee may want a third party, such as a professional advisor, to help with this negotiation. But in practice, these organizations lack funding and resources, with the result that people who are in need of legal advice normally will not be able to get it. So leave a comment below. What do you think the predicament if you're disputing with your employer and you don't have money to pay for lawyers or for legal advice? Because most legal advice who are providing which are providing free services are lacking in resources because the government is not funding them. This is a situation in the United Kingdom and across the globe. The comment below let me know. In most cases, the employer will be entitled to recover overpayments from the employee, and the employee will have difficulty in successfully suing the employer in the courts. An employee may also be liable for possible court costs in pursuing their employer through the courts should the employee lose. Stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much. So, in a minority of cases, the employer may not be able to legally claim an overpayment where they gave the impression that the payment was correct, and the employee could not have reasonably realized that there had been an overpayment, and the employee has changed their position, and as a result of receiving the money, for example, they may have made financial commitments that they otherwise wouldn't have made, so that if they were forced to pay the money back, they would be in a worse position than if the government had not been made, if the overpayment had not been made. This is a complex area of law, and this argument will not only will only rarely succeed, like we have consistently seen how the complexity of the legal circumstances, especially where the relationship between an employer and an employee seem to be inequitable, where the circumstances above apply. The employee could argue that because of the change, because they have changed their position, they should not be required to repay the overpayment. The mere fact that the employee has spent the money in good faith does not necessarily mean that they have changed their position, and therefore does not need to repay the overpayment. For example, if the employee uses the overpayment to pay off a debt that they would have had to pay off anyway, this will probably not be a change of position. These are some of the legal arguments surrounding the situation if you are overpaid as an employee by your employer. Leave a comment below if you have experienced this kind of problems before as a worker in the United Kingdom or in another country. So each case will depend on the individual circumstances. If an employer insists on repayment, someone in such a situation should seek a specialist advice. We have already mentioned situations involving specialization in this under these circumstances, the drawbacks and the merits and also the demerits, if any. But I would rather to say consistently repeating this point about the challenges being faced by advisory bodies in the social sector, also in the public sector, in the statutory sense, and also in terms of non-statutory projects which are been set out they have been set to help people who need help, which they normally fail to provide for one reason or another. Stay tuned, continue watching. So let us look at equal pay, and we look at England, we look at all the different regions of this country. And if you live in one or other part of the United Kingdom, in England or in Wales, Scotland, or Northern Ireland, and you can pay attention, you can look at sex discrimination and equal pay. Who can claim equal pay? What is equal pay? What does a worker compare themselves? Who does a worker compare themselves to? Secrecy clauses in England, Wales, and Scotland. Employers' defense, making a claim, remedies. We look at gender pay reporting, and this document also provides summary of what an equal pay case may involve. Equal pay is a very complicated area of employment law, and specialist advice should be sought as soon as possible. And as always, looking at sex discrimination in England, Wales, and Scotland, a person wanting to bring a sex discrimination claim which relates to the contractual matters, including but not limited to pay, must do so under the Equality of Terms provisions of the Equality Act 2010. The right to equal pay is also regulated by Article 157 of the Treaty on the functioning of the European Union. For most purposes, the European legislation simply enhances the provisions of the domestic legislation. It is, however, important any claim refers to Article 157 so that the rights are incorporated to the claim. I'll leave a comment below if you understand one thing or another about treaties of Europe, or also national law statutorily provided under the system. So looking at what pay is, pay is not just a person's salary, but also other terms and conditions of their contract of employment. This include holiday pay, profit-related pay, profit sharing, sick leave, contractual bonuses, company car allowances, private medical insurance, or life assurance free or subsidized accommodation, staff discounts, and other subsidies nursery or childcare facilities. These are at least leave a comment below if you have been in a situation where you are faced with dispute, or also having to understand the different elements of pay. Article 157 states that the pay means the ordinary basic or minimum wage or salary, and any other consideration, whether in cash or in kind, which the worker receives directly or indirectly in respect of their employment from their employer. These are therefore extended the definition of what constitutes pay for the purposes of an equal pay claim to include other benefits, including non-contractual ones which a person receives in connection with their employment. These include discretionary bonuses, discretionary travel facilities, severance pay, redundancy payments, contractual or otherwise, notice pay, including payments made by the Secretary of State where the employer is insolvent, compensation for unfair dismissal, paid time off to attend external courses or conferences, pension schemes, and also all the rest of that. Occupational pension schemes are also covered by the Pensions Act of 1995 and should not discriminate directly or indirectly against employees. This means that employees should have equal access to the scheme and be treated the same way under the same laws in England and Wales and Scotland. From the 1st October 2010, these schemes are covered by the Equality Act 2010. Stay tuned, continue watching. We are looking at who can claim equal pay. Anyone who works under a contract of service or of apprenticeship, or a contract personally to execute a work or any work or labor, can make an equal pay claim. This means that it covers employees and former employees within 6 months of the end of their employment, although this can be extended in specific limited circumstances. You can look more to find out how to check employment statuses. So therefore, you can look at the situations involving workers or agency workers, and similarly. So people are serving in the armed forces also. However, they must first make a claim under the service redress procedure. Leave a comment below, let me know if you have been in a situation of this sort. So Crown employees also, we look at them, office holders, statutory office holders, for example, police officers, who are protected by Article 157. Comment below if you know anything about Article 157. So we talk about partners in a firm, people who are self-employed, trainees or apprentices. Thank you so much. Stay tuned, continue watching. So a person working wholly, people who are self-employed, training or apprentices, like I said. So a person working wholly at an establishment outside Great Britain is not covered by the Equality Act. The Equality Act is probably applies in Britain, maybe in Europe. However, they will be protected if the employer has a place of business at an establishment in Great Britain, and the work is for the purposes of the business carried out at that establishment, and the employee is ordinarily resident in Great Britain at the time when they apply for or is offered the employment at any time during the course of their employment. Stay tuned, continue watching. So there is no qualifying period for the right to bring an equal pay claim, so a worker can bring a claim from the first day of their employment. So let's look at what equal work is. So to make a claim for equal pay, a worker will have to show that they are being paid less than a comparable worker of the opposite sex who is employed by the same employer and is doing the same or similar job, work rated as equivalent or work of equal value. Comparisons are made between each term of a worker's contract of employment so that a worker may win a case where, for example, they are being paid less, even though their overall terms and conditions are better than those of their male or female colleagues. Stay tuned, continue watching. So a worker can bring a claim if when comparing themselves with a comparator of the opposite sex, and they are doing like work or work rated as equal or work of equal value. And also let us look at like work. And so two jobs are like work if they are the same or broadly similar. Stay tuned, continue watching. For jobs to be broadly similar, any differences between them must be of no practical importance in relation to terms and conditions of employment. In considering the importance or otherwise of any differences, a tribunal will look at how big the differences are and how often they occur in practice. For example, in a case where the workers concerned did the same work, nominal periods of deputizing done by one of them were held to be of no practical importance. Stay tuned, continue watching. Therefore, trivial differences will be disregarded. If you want to know more about this situation, about what has not been held to constitute like work, you can be found on the Equality and Human Rights Commission's website. Stay tuned, continue watching. Let us look at work rated as equivalent. For two jobs to be rated as equivalent, there must have been a job equivalent study under which jobs have been rated as equal or would have been rated as equal, but for the fact that the evaluation scheme itself discriminates against one sex. In practice, this type of claim is rare. If the evaluation scheme itself is discriminatory, a worker wishing to bring an equal pay claim should claim that their work is of equal pay value, of equal value to that of their colleagues of the opposite sex. Stay tuned, continue watching. So a job evaluation scheme is a way of comparing the demands of jobs in an organization. Its aim is to establish a hierarchy of jobs within the organization. This could then be linked to different grades of and pay, for a job evaluation study to be valid for the purpose of an equal pay claim, it must have certain characteristics or be analytical and have must have assessed the value to be placed on the work performed objectively and have analyzed both jobs which are being compared and are being carried out at the place where the claim is employed. Stay tuned, continue watching. So these kind of things which job evaluation, the kind of things which job evaluation study should look at include knowledge, skills, responsibility, decision making, and stay tuned, continue watching. So if our employee's job is rated as equivalent under a job evaluation scheme, they cannot claim compensation for periods before their job was rated as equivalent. Stay tuned, continue watching. If you would like to know more about work which has or has not been held to constitute work rated as equivalent, you can find out on the Equality and Human Rights Commission EHRC website. So let us look at work of equal value. A worker's A work will be of equal value to another worker's B if it is not like B's work or rated as equivalent to B's work, or nevertheless is equal to B's work in terms of effort, skill, decision making required, the nature in their nature. So you're also looking at equal value claims which can be made using comparators paid under different grading systems, collective agreements, or job evaluation schemes, and comparison which can also be made between quite different types of job. If you comment below how you feel about these situations, about this program. If you haven't subscribed to this YouTube channel. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Click like, click notification bell. If you watch this video, share it with family and friends to support it in one way or the other. Thank you so much. So whether two jobs are of equal value is something for a tribunal to decide. To help it do so, a tribunal may appoint an independent expert or decide the matter on the basis of expert evidence presented by the parties without the need for an independent expert, or decide the matter on its own without expert evidence. If you comment below, let me know if you are an employee, where and how you're going to get an expert to help. And if you cannot get free legal advice or expert advice, leave a comment below if you can get it, if you can pay for it. Leave a comment below, let me know your feeling about the power given to employer and employees in terms of contract, in terms of statutory requirements, or actually framework or setups. So we're also looking at the criteria used to establish whether or not two jobs are of equal value or similar to the criteria used for a job evaluation study. If a job is found not to be of equal value, a claim will fail. This is the case even if a large proportion of the job is found to be of equal value. Stay tuned, continue watching. If a job is found to be of equal value or greater value, a claim will succeed and the pay of the two jobs equalized. However, if, for example, a woman's job is found to be of greater value than that of a male colleague, she does not have the right to be paid more than him. She only has the right to be paid the same. Stay tuned, continue watching, and leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. For more information about what has or has not been held to constitute work of equivalent value, you can actually look on the Equality and Human Rights Commission EHRC website. So who does the worker compare himself to? This is a good question. Leave a comment below if you know the answer to such a question. Thank you so much. A worker wishing to bring an equal pay claim will have to find a contractor, a comparator, so to speak. That is another worker of the opposite sex who is employed by the same employer or an associated employer, but this is not necessary in maternity-related cases. So two employers are associated if one has control of the other, or if they are both controlled by a third party or another company. A worker may compare themselves to a worker working for the same employer in another country. For example, if they are working overseas for a British employer and wishes to compare their pay to that of locally recruited staff. So the comparator should work at the same establishment, or if they work at a different establishment, common terms and conditions of employment should apply to the worker and the comparator. The Employment Appeal Tribunal has held that a broad approach is required when deciding whether or not a worker and their a comparator are in the same employment, and the definition of same establishment should not be limited to considering whether the work is undertaken at a single geographical location. Stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much for watching today's material. I've been talking about pay. This falls under employment. Employment also falls under work. And we have been following this material to support part of other videos I've recorded earlier about income, about work, about inequalities, and all these other issues involving society. And also, if you look at the aspect of policy in terms of equality, in terms of other factors, other details in terms of work, and we have been able to look at the different complexities of work and also of pay. But our focus has been in terms of development, work as a development factor, and we're also looking at our culture, how we as society can look at the country as a whole and look at life as a whole and compare with all the complexity of society to kind of like focus on what matters once in a while, to consider the extent of how society enforces inequalities and also injustice, social injustice, economic injustice, cultural injustice in the United Kingdom. And this state of affairs relates to the United Kingdom, but it also relates to other parts of the world, say in Africa or in Asia, in all the other continents. It's a human generated situation. We have created a system in society which runs our life, other than creating a system which we can use to run society. So in other words, the system helps society to run over humanity. And this is a major problem which I have mentioned previously. I'm now trying to look at materials to try and portray the complexity of the system. And if the leave comment below if you think the system is not really complex, if you think society is not complex, if you think there is fairness, if you think the rich should get richer, the poor should get poorer, which is what pay is about. The system seems to be rigged in favor of people with power, and also about employment in general, because technology is now taking over. And the argument, for example, about environmental protection is really valid. But if you see the attitude of environmental campaigner, is sometimes you begin to question their humanity. Do they care about people, or do they care about environment? It's a false economy, but the choice should be clear in terms of priority. I have always consistently say, even if we are campaigning for the environment, we should be able to put more value on humanity than on wealth, or even on the environment. If you look at the environment, the air we breathe, the earth we walk on, the water we drink, the minerals we get, this is about wealth. But humanity is also about wealth, because we are a factor of labor of the economy. And depending how you define wealth, but at philosophical level, but also I would say at the moral level, we need to really re-examine our culture and relate this to development, and make sure we are good survivors. As a species, we are better survivors. The system of the state is getting more and more complex. If you have money, you can access justice. You have seen throughout this video. If you have watched after this time, then you are actually a champion, because with this type of complexity you see with the employment law and the policy surrounding the law, and if you are not an expert, if you don't have money, if you cannot get money from somewhere to pay an expert to represent if there is a dispute between you and employers, especially small and medium businesses, need help from the government, because I don't think they have even enough money to pay lawyers, to support them in a dispute. That's why now the situation is getting even more complicated with different complex types of contracts. The small and medium business are hanging on by the thread. The economic argument now is corporatization. Big businesses, multimillionaires and multi-billionaires, and these people are now having absolute power over people who do not have power at all. The law is a weapon of mass destruction against the majority of the population. 90 going to even 95 of the population of the world are not able to access the law. So the law is inaccessible because the government has stopped paying legal aid. Like, it cannot pay legal aid because of privatization. It's a political ideology. And now policy. The policy we see of privatizing everything, healthcare, is also affecting the law. The housing, and also failing to pay financial support for people who need help. For example, pensioners, those who are not working. Because in a developed world like Britain, or anywhere in Africa also, if you don't work and you are not supported by the government, you literally, you're going to die. So, given this situation, what we have seen in the video, if we don't come together as a species, especially if you are not a multi-billionaire, you are going to die. When I talk of death, I mean generationally. If you are poor today, you don't leave an inheritance of wealth, material wealth, but also moral wealth to the next generation. Because that's what else you're rich. You're still going to die. Multimillionaires and multimillionaires are going to die because of wickedness. Moral latitude, moral value should come back to support us. It's a life of matter and a matter of life and death. If people who are multimillionaires and multimillionaires are now behaving like lunatics, like people who are psychopaths, who are on, because they have lost their humanity, they have sold their soul to the devil. Literally, because you see, the way people behave, especially among the upper class, who only think of wealth, think of power, they have exposed humanity. They have exposed who we are. We need to really focus. We need to really go back to basic. We need to do what is right. If something is wrong, it is wrong. We lie. You look at politicians. We are in the UK. There's election. In America, there's debate for election. There are elections across the globe. Now or in the future, we have seen in the past. We have seen the chaos in Kenya. And you ask yourself, how can you tax poor people in Africa? Poor people should never pay taxes. The wealthy nation should be paying grants, paying foreign aid in grant, not even loan, to African countries. When we neglect a continent like Africa, that shows how wicked we are in the West, in the developed world. But we are all humans, whether we are rich or poor. We need to really pay attention to. I'm not really saying rich poor people are righteous, because they are not. Even I am not. But you see, we need to know that and start the process of going back to doing what is right. It seems like a joke. Life seems like a joke to many people, because that's the way we have been trained in schools, in society, in movies. We set ourselves up for extinction. As a species, children are dying on the street. Families are at war. And politicians look like dogs. People in America, politicians in America, looking like we are criminals running America, like criminal gangs, being president of America. And they are criminals. And this is the fact. And they are not even ashamed of themselves. In America, we are now we risk electing a criminal to run America. America is supposed to run the world. And we sit there and watch. We think it is a joke. You see, the end is here. We are seeing the end of the beginning. If we don't do anything now, it's going to be too late for humanity. Because America is supposed to protect the world. You see, righteousness should come from America. But now, criminality, America is a criminal country because it is being run by criminal gangs. Like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a criminal. That is official in America. We have now branded our Prime Minister in Britain as a liar and a cheat. Also a criminal suspect during COVID-19, for example. Our Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer were a criminal suspect. If they did not pay the fine, they could have been convicted. But they got the money, so they paid the COVID-19 rule offense, the offense of breaking COVID-19. They had the money, so they paid. Imagine if they didn't have the money, they could have been criminals, from being criminal suspect to criminals. And this is the law, and this is what is now coming to light. And the British people, the people of the world, seem not to care. It is time for us to revive. It's time for us to come back to ourselves, our senses. We need to really be good people. We should be good people. We are shameful species. We are supposed to lead animals. Animals are now leading humans. I stop this material here. Thank you so much. If you have watched this far, leave a comment below, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, click notification bell. Watching this video, watch with family and friends, share with family and friends to watch, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.